So welcome back to Barefoot English. I've shown you a little bit of this wonderful coffee shop, and I've set myself up in a position that you get to see some of the beautiful lanterns that they have up. In the front, it was a little difficult for me to show that as my background because the sun is coming in. So this will have to do, and I really hope you enjoy the view. As I said, I go to open air coffee shops because of COVID. I don't like to go inside places, and that's my prerogative, and I'm gonna stick to it. But there's so many coffee shops that are open air, and I really prefer them anyway because they're much more in touch with nature. The conversation for today actually comes from a lesson that I had yesterday and a lesson that I had just a few days ago. It brought up a subject, and the subject is immigrant assimilation. Assimilation is to become part of a new culture. To assimilate is to become part of something new, to take on the culture, values, language of a new place. An immigrant is somebody that moves to a new place. And the original conversation actually stemmed from one of my students who was speaking to her grandfather, who is almost 100 years old, born in 1929. While they were talking in the background of my lesson, she turned to me and she said, "Could you understand the conversation?" And I said, "Well, I understood you, but I didn't understand your grandfather." And she said, "Well, that's because I'm speaking Vietnamese and he is speaking Chinese." And what I discovered about their family was that her ancestors were Chinese immigrants to the region, coming over with his parents, the grandfather's parents. And so he grew up speaking Chinese in his home as well as in the surrounding community, which had a very strong Chinese population. However, she's now third generation and is fully adapted to being Vietnamese, fully Vietnamese. She understands some Chinese and she's studying more, but she is definitely not bilingual in Chinese. The grandfather's child is bilingual because she grew up in speaking Chinese in the home, but the granddaughter is now really a fourth generation Vietnamese on at least one side of her family, and probably much longer on the other side of the family. And that's something that occurs. We call it the 3-generation rule. The first generation that comes to a country, any country in the world, usually maintains much of their cultural identity and language. Sometimes one spouse will learn more English or French or German or Norwegian or whatever language, or Vietnamese, whatever language is of this new homeland that they've moved to for work purposes. And especially in the earlier generations, when oftentimes it was the man working and the woman wasn't outside of the house working, that would be the man who learned enough English to get by, but at home and in the communities that they would build, they would be speaking their native tongue. The second generation would vary. There were parents that really wanted their children to assimilate, and therefore they really pushed for that assimilation to take place with that second generation. And so some of those kids are not fully bilingual. They may be able to speak to their family in the native tongue, but outside of the house they're using the new language, and that becomes the dominant language in their book system, in their brain, right? And also they adapt the cultures. They adapt to the cultures. Other families really push to try to maintain that their native culture, language, and values on the second generation. And so sometimes you'll have a second generation that is really fully bilingual and to an outsider appears to be maintaining all of the customs and traditions. However, those children will end up having children that just become whatever that new identity is. And again, I'm using broad strokes because immigrants go from country to country. I use America as an example a lot, of the United States, because I come from it and I'm very aware of what happens there. But it is true for all communities, including Vietnam, that has integrated various populations into its Vietnamese population today. They come from a diverse background. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. It was a little, it's brief, but it's shorter than the one that I had with my student that kind of extended much longer and went into much more detail. See you soon at our next coffee talk and our next coffee shop. Peace from Vietnam, and I'm going to enjoy my coffee and my breakfast now. Much love. See you soon on Barefoot English. Like, share, and subscribe.